from COVID and onto the next thing. So we have two great speakers lined up for today to kind of shed light on our solutions, what we can kind of do to improve our situations and the environments our practices are working in, especially when it comes to the energy crisis that South Africa is facing at the moment. I think what we will do is just give it a couple more minutes and allow Dr. van Rooyen to log back in. So just let's give it maybe 2 minutes and then we can commence. Yeah, while we wait for Dr. van Rooyen to log in, I think this is an opportune time for us to just go through some house rules regarding the webinar that we're going to run today. I would just like to start by asking all participants to refrain from raising their hands. I know in most Zoom meetings, that's how we kind of get each other's attention, but we'd be communicating through the Q&A tab, so you could write any comments there, and these are the questions which I will then pose to our speakers during the Q&A session. So if you are going to like it to be addressed by a specific speaker, please you could just also include that in the question when you're asking it. CPD certificates will be loaded to the HPCSA platform, and you will be able to access all your certificates under your member profile. As has been the case of late. The event tonight qualifies you for 1 clinical CEU. We'd also just like you to please look at completing the evaluation form at the end of the webinar, as that feedback is valuable to SADA and how we set up future webinars so that we are addressing concerns and meeting your expectations.
Dr. Matai, Dr. Rooyen confirmed you will be online just now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Give him another minute.
No problem. So we've got a good turnout so far. We've got 214 participants already. I know we've got a lot more lined up, and I think on our screens at the moment we can see that save the date that was sent out regarding the Congress that's going to happen in Cape Town, and I think we're all looking for a nice holiday. So the 25th to the 27th of August, and I'm sure SADA will be sending out further communiques as we get closer to the time regarding the Congress tickets. So yes, so do save the date. I think it'll be great to meet down at the coast. It's been a while since we've been to Cape Town. To those that have just joined, we're just waiting for Dr. van Rooyen. He did have a little bit of a technical glitch right at the end. We'd prepped and we were ready, and here we are. I think he's back, and so we'll just allow him to a moment to set up. So please bear with us.
Hi guys, I really apologize for this, but it was unplanned for this thing to crash right at the moment that we started. So let me just, without wasting time, just get the lecture back on.
While that's going on, Dr. van Rooyen, let me quickly give a quick introduction. This is Dr. Pieter van Rooyen. He's been in private practice since 1990, and he's gained world-class experience in maxillofacial and oral surgery before joining Pathiodent as a partner. And that was since 2003 till the present moment. His practice is has a special focus on digitally based reconstructive dentistry. His skills include dental implantology, 3D CAD/CAM oral reconstruction, aesthetic dentistry, and aligner therapy. He's an ISCD certified trainer. His interests include adventure sport, as most dentists do, but we will allow him now to take over as he proceeds to share his screen.
All right, we're ready to share. Thank you. There we go. Okay, how does that look, everybody? Is that all right?
That looks good. Dr. van Rooyen, you can proceed.
Okay, guys. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Apologies for the bumpy little start, like adventure sports, you know. Not much of IT competency, I tell you, but here we go. So as you all know that nowadays we have a few issues with the power, and that we lose a lot of productive time, and that our practices, you know, need to run on tight budgets and tight schedules. So in our practice, we went to solar some time ago, almost 13 years now, and I can tell you we haven't missed a beat. Nothing. It's been great. And you will also see when I go through the story, you will understand that I will have a strong tendency to lean towards the solar side rather than on generators. So without further ado, let's just make sure what is certain and what not. So a good friend of mine who is in practice here says that, you know, everything goes when you have load shedding and it's stage 6 and all those kind of things, and then it is just production time that's gone and you can't get it back. You just cannot win. So what are we discussing in this situation? We are discussing the current crisis that we all have in our practices. So which side do I go? Do I go for a generator? Do I go for solar? What options do I have? And how do I afford all of these interesting things? So, you know, we need to make this work. So therefore, it's important that we look at the affordability as well. The most important thing that you need to know right off the bat is that little triangle that you have on top there is, what do you need? It's not a matter of what you can have, it's what do you need, what's important that's going to work in your practice. And there's a lot of factors that involves that, but we're talking here about the three basic things in electricity: volts, amps, and watts. All right, so you need to calculate your need, and that will be an assessment of how much you need to run at maximum. In other words, if you want to keep all your air conditioners on, you need to put some money down to do that, you know. That's unfortunately how it is. So if you want to run 5 or 6 surgeries, or you want to run 1 surgery, your output and your need is going to be different. On the internet, there's 1,000,001 calculators available. There's no point in me trying to explain to you how to calculate. Just download one of these little calculators and go and check, and you can see what you need to do there. It's very easy and very simple to do that. As far as your equipment is concerned, all the ratings of your equipment is generally indicated on the back of the piece of equipment. There would be a little plate or some other sticker of sorts that will give you all the power needs and requirements of the equipment that you have in your practice. And then the most important thing is bigger is not always better in this case. So sometimes bigger is just going to cost you so much more that the efficiency of what you are doing on the financial side just goes out the back door. So it's better not to just go for size. Yeah, you get the right stuff. So here's one of those little calculating websites that I've spoken about. You can see there on Rapid Tables that you can calculate the complete necessity that you would have to run your business sufficiently and efficiently. So when we talk about solar versus a generator, there's a couple of things that we need to know. And that's whether you look at solar or generators, pros and cons are at the order of the day. There are rules and regulations that you need to comply to, whether you're in types of buildings, a municipality, all kinds of things that you need to understand regarding rules and regulations that you have to comply to. The next thing that's most important is what's it going to cost you, you know, to install. So are you looking at generator, are you looking at solar? What kind of input are you looking at to sort of understand the situation here? Once the system is put up in your practice, you're pretty much tied in and you have to work from there. So the running cost of a setup is so important because you've got to know what's going to come your way in terms of cost. Finance your system, obviously just as important, and I'm going to make one introduction tonight, which I only learned about this weekend. But it's a little bit for the guys from my years and time in practice. You know, we've got a bit of old school financing and old school of views about one or two things nowadays. As finance doesn't suit us so well. So there is a new option available now for us, which is more based in the old school way of financing that the guys that have been in practice for a long time will probably understand a bit better. All right, let's look at the generator story first. Pros for generators. So what's important here for you? So number one is generators relatively cheap. There's no huge cost right in the beginning. The reason for a generator might be the building that you are in. If you're in a big office block and the block has got a generator, then they'll probably ask you nowadays on your rental agreement or your whatever lease you have on the building, that you might have to chip in for the cost of the generator. So you need to know that in that way, you're going to be tied to a generator. If you have a building of your own, you know, what are you going to do? Are you going to go the generator route? And you got to think why and where you're going to be able to do this and how you're going to fix this up. And then for me personally, the only positive to a generator is the fact that it can handle a lot of load. You know, you can pack it on those boys and they will keep working, you know. So yeah, that's it can go well. So just as a bit of a thing here, I went on the internet and I just checked a little bit on price check, as you can see there. So you have a 10 kVA. You've obviously now determined how much you need, and you've decided on 10 kVA. Then you can buy this little 4-stroke generator for about 50K over the internet. Just bear in mind that it burns about 2.1 liters per hour of diesel. So as far as generators goes, this is like a relatively cheap alternative. Some of the others that I checked out is ones that say they run silent. This one's even cheaper, and it's 3-phase, but it remains a diesel generator. So noise at 72 decibels might not sound like much, but I tell you what, if that hum is in your ear all the time, you've got to think about it a little bit. You can also see that only 4 kVA more present you with a substantially more expensive generator. So these are all public knowledge things. It's not, you know, that I got it somewhere. It's just online. You just go and Google. Let's see what a generator costs. And these are the kind of things that you can come up with. Another thing is, depending on the building and all the infrastructure that is around you or that you have, or where you find yourself at, you know, the position of a generator is probably going to be a very important thing to you. If it's in a building, then a big building, then obviously I suppose you've got to worry about that last bit that comes into your practice that is linked to it, and that the landlord, the owner of the building, will have to look after the connection up to you, say to your, for all intents and purposes, call it your doorstep, but up to your DB box. All right. So what are the cons for generators? Maintenance cost. So you need to service a generator approximately every 200 to 300 hours. So if you would have to have, like we've been having now, say 4 hours a day, you're talking about 5 days a week. You're talking about 20 hours a week. It gives you 10 weeks and you have to have it serviced. And it's not a cheap exercise. So you've got to get someone to come out. They're going to come and service. It's got to be serviced against some requirements, and that costs you money. You've got a professional that looks at it. These guys don't necessarily going to come cheap. Noise pollution. That's a huge one for me personally. I live right across the Blue Peter Hotel in Bloubergstrand in Cape Town, and they've just installed a generator. I tell you what, I want to kill. The noise that thing, it's disturbing our sleep. It's doing all kinds of things, and we are busy with the council. I can tell you that a very famous hotel in the center of Cape Town was closed down until they changed their noise levels. So if you are in a residential area or you practice from a house, please make sure that you attenuate your generator and that you do not irritate the living daylights out of the people around you. Diesel cost. Yeah, what do we say about that? So our dear minister says he's now keeping the lights on. Don't know what diesel is going to cost us very soon, but at the moment you can understand that 22 Rand a litre or whatever it is. I don't know what it is up country, but 2 liters an hour, 22 Rand a litre, you can easily see that can become a very, very big outlay in your practice. So you've got to be very careful if you're a single practice, or you 4 or 5 guys or so. Just be reasonable about what the diesel price can do. We don't know, so just very careful on that side. In terms of your building, I've mentioned 1 or 2 reasons for a generator in some instances where you actually don't have a choice. So you're forced to have a generator because the building has one, and you as an individual in that whole setup cannot really change that. So that forces you to be sort of locked in to the generator. So in my last 13 years of having a solar system, I can tell you quite a bit about the pros. You can be a totally off-grid setup, it just costs you more. Or you can be grid tied. What that means is that you will be generating energy to store in your batteries while the power is on. And obviously solar, by the term itself, says that you can generate energy from the sun. So when we talk about installing a solar system, it's generally quite a bit less invasive in the sense that you've got different spaces to put stuff. It runs differently, and you don't have a noise issue. So when the fan goes on your inverter, it's generally very low-key white noise, and you can easily attenuate that without any problem. Once the solar system is up, it's running. It just goes. It just keeps on going. It doesn't give you any hassles, generally, is our experience. But I think in the 13 years, we called out once, maybe twice, to come and just check on one or two things. We started initially with old battery system. It's still running. So our input cost initially was quite high. But after that, I'll tell you what, the hours of having the practice open is just made up for it in no uncertain terms. All right. And then the last thing that's nice about solar is that if your system is now 3 kVA, because that's what you could afford, and then 6 or 8 months later, you can put in another 3 kVA inverter, or maybe a 5 kVA, as far as the electrics and those kind of thing is concerned. I think Nafisa will be much better qualified than me to tell you about those things. But it's modular, so you can build your system as you can afford and as your needs require that. So as your practice grows, you can extend your system. I suppose you can change generators as well if you want, but I just think it's just the solar is sort of, if it's running and you just add on, it's just so much easier. All right, now the negative part of a solar system is initially your output cost. So if you're looking at like anything around 8 or 10 kVA, you're looking at about 180 to 200K minimum. So it's a little bit more than what a generator is, but you'll quickly see that your diesel account will catch up on that in no time. Roof space, or any other space that you need to put on your photovoltaic panels, that's a very important thing that you need to know and understand. Have I got enough space for enough panels to generate the energy that I require, which then I can store? And then this is the last one, is truly just, well, I would suppose it's quite broad said, but we as general dental practitioners, you know, we don't often pay attention to these kind of things, and then we take a beating when the guys come and quote you. So the reason behind this whole talk is to inform you, to make sure that you know, man, that you know what you're looking at. So, you know the old story, the guy sells you a computer which you can send NASA up the road, and all you needed was to run your practice management system. So we don't know enough about these systems, and we generally get caught out by all unknown jargon and all kinds of things that's going to take your bucks away. So be careful and make sure that you know something at least. So why do we then put solar on for more critical things, such as looking at our equipment? So the energy that you get from your inverter and from your batteries is the current is far more clean. It's not so spiky, it's not up and down. It's a much more stable environment for all these most expensive things that we have, and that run on very low currents and things that can be easily affected. The other thing that's most important is the turnover time from when the power goes out to when your secondary energy system kicks in is with, I think in our practice, is 0.2 of a second or 0.02 or something like that. Crazy. We don't even know. We don't even know when it changes over. So with generator gets the message from that the power's gone off, and then has to start up. And I mean, it's a diesel engine, so it starts like a diesel engine, and that may give you a little bit of a delay, which might upset your computers or something else, unless you have some other form of backup to prevent that turnover there. And then the other thing to me that is in our lovely South Africa, sunny Africa, you know what? It's it's our blessing to have the amount of sun that we have in all our provinces. So and at this moment in time, it doesn't look to me if the taxman is winning that fight. So you can't, as far as I'm concerned, tax the sun. So that's free energy that you are getting just by managing your system correctly. The second bit for me that is very, very important is the fact that once you've generated energy, what do you do with that then? Is, okay, I've had the sun shining on the roof all day long, and now I've got some electricity. But when you have a generator, I have not heard of any generator yet, and that's just me. I haven't heard of a generator that's been connected to battery systems. But if they have a solar panel or two, then you can connect it to a battery system and store that energy for use later. Hence the success of the system. And then a big thing, again, like I said, just out of personal, is the noise pollution thing. And I've already mentioned the fact that there's virtually no maintenance. Once the thing's up and running, it goes. It's got a certain amount of recharge interventions. So if you get a good battery system, it's going to recharge for 10,000 times or 8,000 times or whatever. And you start looking at 8,000 times in a 24-hour cycle, you're talking about many years of good service that's coming your way. And then also on all these things, you've got all these fancy apps nowadays. So you can manage your electricity, you can manage the storage, you can manage the usage. You can optimize how you implement your system by having your app that runs on your inverter, and you can see what happens to your power. So you can see where you're wasting, losing, where can you save, and all those things that are very available, not difficult to ascertain what's going on. Then, talking about that, I'm saying to you guys that you need to know what's going on in the solar world. I'm putting in a few brands of the inverters and other parts of the solar system so that at least when you see the picky or the guy says a name or something, that you at least recognize it and recognize which are the better brands and which are the sort of more trusted systems to put in, which are the better operators installing, and so forth. So you need to know all these things. So I've added a few brand names here, and I've dumped it into a bit of the componentry so that you also understand that this thing is built up out of about 5 or 6 components. So first and foremost, obviously, let's talk from top down. So you have your energy generation from your photovoltaic panels. That then goes to an MPPT charge controller, which goes to inverter, which then puts the stuff into your batteries. And then you have all kinds of cabling and switchgear. All right. So if we look at the panels, there are standards for all of these things. I mean, the guys that were at the SARA Western Cape at Prof. Miller's lecture, where he spoke about gray products and black products that comes from alternative markets, which are not so good for us, and which are not so good for our patients either. But we are very much tempted to buy them because of the price and so forth. Now, the same counts here. You need to make sure that the panels that you are using is at least tier 1 rated or approved by SABS. Now, the complete breakdown of what tier 1 means, I can't really tell you, because you know what, I'm one of you. So the complete importance of having proper solar panels will give you longevity. These things stay forever. They give you great performance. That brings about that it's safe to have them on your roof. They don't give you trouble. And then most important, panels need to be earthed. So please don't let your cables lie around on your good old corrugated iron roof, might not be so good. So make sure that your panels are earthed when it gets installed. So if you would have to have a panel that generates 50 volts, and you are allowed by virtue of your inverter or your MPPT charger, I'm not 200% sure, but anyway, you're allowed 6 different panels on a string, then you are able to generate 300 volts. That's going to go to the charge controller. All right. And that will then end up being converted into energy that you can store. So the panels come in different capacities. So as far as I know nowadays, 450 volt is sort of on the higher end of the scale. You wouldn't really buy a 50 volt panel. I think that would be a bit of a waste, but this is just in terms of making the maths easy and just to explain how it would work. Some of the quality brands that we find in South Africa would be one called Canadian Solar, and the other one would be JA Solar. I'm sure Nafisa can add 1 or 2 more, maybe even more than that, but these are the ones that I'm aware of. So I'm just sharing it with you because that's what I know of. I can't share about anything else. All right. So when you have a charge controller, most inverters nowadays would come with the charge controllers built into it. When you have the Victron system, then you're probably still going to need to put a charge controller on that. Now, many of you guys know that I enjoy sailing quite a bit and I enjoy the water. So if you want to put a Rolls-Royce system into something, then put a Victron system in. These are great systems. They are robust and it's expensive, yeah, sure, but these systems are incredible. So yeah, in the yachting industry worldwide, this is quite big. So if it can work on the ocean, I'm sure it can work in your practice. And then one of the things that's important with a charge controller, it has to be able to handle spikes that happen. And therefore, it's important to have your voltage around about 450 so that you can maintain and continue your supply. Now, some of the inverters that's got everything in is our good friend Tesla. So it's nice and it's beautiful and everything is there, and it's got quite a good well, it's not a bad thing. I mean, in terms of the output and all those things, I mean, it's a powerful system and it's nice and everything and neat, but it's expensive, eh? So yeah, if you don't have budget issues, it's nice. That's all I can say about it. It's nice. It's like buying a nice car or something, I would imagine. Oh, yes, they do make cars. Just forgot a little bit. No. All right. So one of the things about solar also that's very nice is that if you do bring, most of the things nowadays are very presentable. So, if you can't really hide it, then at least you can get a decent installation inside of your practice. And it doesn't look so, industrial within your practice. So some of the other quality brands that you can be hybrid inverters and can be grid tied are these 4 are ones that are, I don't want to say readily available, because at the moment everybody's putting in solar and you wait for everything. But SunSync and Daya are pretty much one and the same. They have different apps that drive them, and the SunSync is probably a little bit more friendly than the Daya. But I personally have a Daya inverter at home, and I can tell you it's fantastic. We also have one that runs the lab side in the practice, so we haven't had any issues. So for Daya, I'll vouch. I know them very well, and I think they work extremely well. Our oldest system is a Victron system. A reason for going with the DEA on the upgrade or on the add-on was purely a cost issue. Victron is beautiful, it's lovely, but it is a costly product. And as you can see, Grow What, it's also nice and neat, but I don't know much about it. So when we say there an inverter, yeah, 30 to 50,000, you're looking at an inverter from, I would say, about 8 kVA up to about 14, 13.5, 14. That would be within that range, the price range mentioned over there. And remember, in the case of the DEA and the Sunseek and the Grow What, your MPPT charge is included. On this multi-2 of the Victron there, you're going to still have to add your MPPT charger. All right, then let's talk a little bit about the cabling and the switchgear. When you have these panels, you need a DC photovoltaic fuse box. You need a direct current box. You need the right fuses and circuit breakers also for direct currents, and then a surge arrestor is a wonderful thing to add in. It's a must. But anyway, do not mix and match what you have. Just make sure that things are the same all along, because it just works better. And then as you can see there, that the photovoltaic cables are between 4 and 6 millimeters. Remember, these are copper cables, so they're expensive in terms of length and so on. So that's all the type of things that might affect your cost, you know. Some of the batteries that we find, Hubble is a good battery. Volta is the battery that is sort of tied to the DEA system. And then Sunseek also have their own batteries. Now, generally what happens is if you buy a matching battery to what your inverter brand is, they'll improve the guarantee or do some interesting bits of maths to make you buy into their system. We all know how it works. They try to tie you in a little bit. And then, as I can say, some of the better brands of the batteries there, Sunseek, Hubble, DEA, and obviously Tesla's got some fantastic equipment. And then Freedom One is another one. In terms of classifying your battery, there's a classification called Cat1C. Again, I'm not going to elaborate on the definition. Just make sure that that's on the table, Cat1C, because that is directly linked to the amount of discharge you can do. So you can buy some GPOs, but then your depth of discharge is becoming problematic. So you need to make sure that you can discharge somewhat better and be more efficient. The batteries, cable specs to be matched to that of the inverter. You've got to have your batteries rated according to amp per meter. So how much can they put out? You need to understand that. It varies between, the cables vary between 35 and 50 millimeters. So there can be some serious cabling around there. And then DC fuses for batteries must match the discharge. So it doesn't help if your fuse doesn't match, then it's going to blow all the time. So for example, if you would have to have 8 kVA, then about 160 amp DC fuse would do you fine. It would work all right. All right, now we get to the nitty-gritty part. Once you got your system sorted out, you know what you've got, you know what you need. There's a couple of factors that's going to influence the cost here. So if you need 10 panels or 8 panels because you run 3 kVA system or 5 kVA system, if you are going to run a system bigger than that, then you're going to need more photovoltaic panels, and there's a cost increase there. If you're far away from the panels are far away from where your charger and your inverter is and your batteries are, then cabling is going to cost you more money per meter. As I've mentioned before, is the output of the system. The higher the output, the higher the cost. It's a simple equation, one-on-one. Then if you use 1 or 2 batteries, what we've done at home now, we've just added a battery because the Cape winter is coming up and we're a little bit concerned that we might run out of battery time if it rains for 3 or 4 days. Then we've added a battery now, so that increases the cost again. And then in terms of your installation, your roof type is very, very important. It's important to know whether you're on a flat roof. It's important to know whether you've got tile roof. I've got an old house, and believe it or not, there's still some of the very, very old tiling on, which is based in ferro cement, so just fiber cement at least. So just check how you have to tie these things down, and on what structures you have to keep them safe, so that they don't blow off your roof and all kinds of other weird and wonderful things that can happen to your system from an aging perspective. If you have a triple story, very high pitched roof, oak might charge you a little bit for his safety as well, so that can influence the cost. And then, like we all want to be good dentists, and we want to charge more for what we do. I would imagine this is equivalent to having a good team. You're going to pay a bit more, but at least you can sleep securely that things are right. Okay, now how do we pay for these things? So first and foremost, if you don't need the bank and those kind of guys, do it cash. If you can do it, whatever, that's your finances, your thing. But for the normal mortals amongst us, we have to sometimes, get the money to do these kind of things. So there are ways and means, and some of the banks have now gone on to specific funding for solar power. Just check out all the T's that they're all crossed, and check the I's that they're all dotted. These institutions are ruthless nowadays. So just be careful what you sign, and make sure that things are in, at least, if not totally in your favor, at least, acceptable terms and conditions that you deal with. In some instances, some of the banks have partnered with some of the installation guys. So the bank might say to you, yeah, we'll fund it, but you have to use so and so and so. And generally speaking, we would expect these guys to be quite competitive and quite efficient, because, the bank's putting the money online and on risk on your behalf in a way, and probably they will need to make sure that the guys install are good. We've got a friend in our midst, one of our colleagues. His wife runs a bond business, and it's called In-House Bond Brokers. So for the Western Cape folks, it's easy because her business is right here. So applying for the finance for this can be cumbersome, So if there's a lot of things that is involved in your application, it might be best to make use of someone that can apply to all the banks at the same time, pretty much like when you apply for your bond and those kind of things. So Maurice Jeffer here from Cape Town can help you in that. If I'm not sure about anyone otherwise in the country, but maybe some of the other guys can, say and talk. There is one that I will show you now in a second that we can do. But it's also important to know that there may be some exclusions that you might not be ready for. So just check out in your application how things are going to go. So here's just Maurice's details. For those of you who want to take a screenshot there, that's her details. You can contact her. And, not that I want to just promote any business, but this is someone friendly to our profession. So it would be someone nice to support. And now this is now the latest thing that I've come to learn is this Medi-co-op financing. I don't know, maybe those of the country know them a little bit better, but here in Cape Town, certainly for me, it was a new meat. Like I said, for the older guys, if you remember MLS and you remember old Investec and you remember old Imperial Bank and those things, these guys work more on those kind of principles. And it might just be the right solution for you. They're apparently been in the market for about a year or so, from what I understand, but I haven't dug my heels into this yet and looked at it in depth. but the guy that represented them at the SADA Congress was SB Burger. He was a really nice chap, and we had a wonderful chat about this. And I'm sure there is maybe financing some other stuff in your practice that may need, and then SB and his team could help you out there. All right. I've got the details for Shane and Maurice on there. Shane was the electric guy that we use at our practice. I'm sure Nafisa can also help with some other names and things here, but I'm just showing mostly for the Western Cape guys for these oaths. And then if people on a national basis, maybe, you know, I don't know how Maurice works a business really, but I think it's worth a mention. So thank you for hearing me out for a couple of minutes here. If there's any questions, you can send it to my assistant who runs all these thingies. And if you want me to direct questions to people with electronic and electrical knowledge, then I can do that for you via Shane. And also, I would imagine that Nafisa will give her details as well for you guys to be assisted. But in any event, I'm going to hand the floor back to the guys at the control room there, if everybody's okay. If there's any questions, I see there's 3 questions in the Q&A. Dr. Paul, I don't know how you want to handle that.
Thanks, Doctor. Yeah, sorry, sorry for interrupting you. Yes, I have been keeping an eye on that, and I think we do have a few questions. Let's start. There was one request first for the link to that website to kind of calculate your energy requirements. I don't know if we can put that maybe into the chat so that everyone has kind of access to it. Sorry, Dr. van Rooyen, you are muted if you are saying something. Okay. But the first question that anonymous attendee did ask was, have you had problems with the rust on your solar panels? And if so, how do you mitigate against rust?
Okay, as you know, I just told you I'm in Cape Town, so rust is not unfamiliar to us. So up to now, basically we've used an aluminium installation instead of going for steel. So we use a heavy gauge aluminium installation, which obviously is a little bit more efficient when it comes to the rusting. So up to now, we have not had any problems. So I would imagine that you can change upcountry, maybe rust is not that big a problem. So proper coatings, proper undercoats with a little bit of rust preventers included in your base coat. And this generally for your framework. The panels themselves are aluminium framed, so they last out at sea. Some of these quality systems go on yachts and boats, and also on power hungry buoys that are out in the sea and so on, and they last for 10 to 15 years. I may say that I have a friend in the yachting industry that makes use of these panels, and they've got like really fancy panels with Gorilla Glass and heavy gauge aluminium and all kinds of things. So that's basically looking at your rust is a question of prevention rather than trying to fix it up later.
Okay, thank you. The next question was, and I think you did touch upon it a little bit, all the months of continuous winter rain and strong cold winds in Cape Town would render your solar option suboptimal. How do you cope with that?
Get enough batteries. It's never, you must remember, a photovoltaic panel doesn't work on daylight. It works on ultraviolet. So, you know, the least little bit of sun, it's okay. And then for the Okies that don't know the Cape weather, it'll hardly rain more than 3 days on end. Like I said, we've got old school gel batteries still on the older system. We've got 16 of those guys. So we made sure that we have ample battery time. So we can, on a rainy day, and the other thing is your grid tying, okay? So if you've got enough batteries and you are grid tied, your batteries will be charging when the power is on, all right? So when your Eskom feed is running, your batteries are charging. And obviously you pay for that charge, but in the event of having then difficulty with the load shedding as such, then it's a very simple equation, then it goes back. As soon as the sun comes back, then you're back on saving. So you always win, no matter what. You may have a cost, but you always win. I can just give you the numbers on my my system in my house. We installed 8 kVA. We've got 3 Hubble batteries, 5 kVA batteries, and the 8 kVA system, like I said. And we've got 10 panels, 12 panels on the roof, 12 panels on the roof. Our system cost us just south of 200K. My electricity bill went from 3,600 Rand a month to 600. So I've got 3 grand to pay off my system with per month. At 200K, on a bond rate, we were able to add it onto our bond. So on the bond rate as it is now, you're basically looking at what, 2,000 Rand on 200,000. So, and in a couple of years' time, system's paid off and it's still working. You know, so you are going to win. If you solar tied, you're going to win in the end. It might not be this week or this year, but you're going to win in the end. As far as the practice is concerned, just think about, like I said, how quickly we get to 200 hours. So what are your practice running at turnover-wise or cost or profit-wise per hour? Just count 200 hours for yourself and then look at where you go to. It's unquestionable that you cannot go without it in our current circumstances. And I cannot foresee that whoever's going to become the power supplier or utility for the country, you won't be up and running in the next 5 to 7 years, so that it's uninterrupted. So that's my point of view, though. It's not politics. It's just understanding at what state our grid is. So yeah, it's an essential grudge pay that you have to do at some point.
Okay, and again from another anonymous attendee, a warning has been sent out by security companies warning that solar panels were being stolen off rooftops. After all, we live in South Africa. Can you advise about insurance against theft?
No, I can't. I have not looked into that. Build your house high enough and pitch your roof.
Okay.
No, jokes aside, I haven't looked into the insurance side of it. I did mention it to our broker, so I'm sure I'll see it in a month or two's time, that it'll come onto the part of the, you know, our short-term insurance or our bond insurance or house insurance at least. But no, I'm not really familiar with how the insurance industry is looking at it.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
I'll that later on.
Oh, okay.
Okay, perfect. So we'll come back to that later. The next question, again by anonymous attendee, what size generator would I need for a single dental room with 1 chair? You'd be able to volunteer and answer?
That will be for Nafisa. Yeah, I know. You know, what are you running in your practice? If you're a single guy, are you running single surgery, or running 2 surgeries? Are you running a pan machine? Have you got a CBCT? Are you running in-house milling system or not? Are you on scanners? Are you on all those things? So you got to go and look at your requirements. But I would imagine that a single guy can probably get away with about 3 to 5 kVA. But Nafisa will be much more qualified than I am to answer that.
So we'll circle back to that one as well. Then there's a question would I be able to use a trolley inverter, which are available at Leroy Merlin or Builders Warehouse, instead of solar? We normally see an average of 4 hours of load shedding in a single day and have just 2 rooms.
Yes, I'm sure you would be able. I went to ACDC the other day, to be exact, last Wednesday. Not because I wanted to do anything about my solar or anything. I wanted to buy a battery for my bike battery, for my bicycle light, because if I want to commute, it's now morning time. It's starting to get dark now in Cape Town, so I needed to get my bicycle light fixed. And I went in, and this whole solar thing is on top of everybody's mind and everything. So I said, okay, so have you got one of those mobile inverter thingies around? Oh, yeah, we just sold about 1,000. And I'm going to name them because I don't actually care. I'm going to name them because, I don't want you to buy a machine that's going to break down on you. And the salesman said to me, oh no, they've just sold about 1,000 of these and they've taken about 80% of them back. So maybe what I'll do is I'll put the name in the chat box, and then it's not so abrupt. But anyway, so yeah, you can, but it may be that you buy the wrong one,
Okay, and then again from an anonymous attendee, do you sell units back to the power grid in Cape Town?
No.
Okay.
And the reason is very simple. Go and look at the math. The council wants to pay you R1.06 for a unit. All right, they're going to on-sell it for R2.77.
Yeah,
that's number one. Number two is, if you want to on-sell on my infrastructure, you're going to pay me for my infrastructure. I'm not going to pay you. Okay? So that's number one. It doesn't work like that. The council has to revise that. That's one. And the second part I'm concerned about, call me a conspiracist. I'm not going to tell them what my system is. It's got nothing to do with them.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. van Rooyen. I think that's all the questions, and there are a few that we'll pose to Ms. Nafisa Farid, who I'm going to actually introduce next. So thank you very much, Dr. van Rooyen, for that informative lecture. And I'm sure if anyone has any further questions, you did share your details, they can also maybe contact you as well.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we move on to our next speaker. Thank you. I know we are running slightly late. Thank you for your patience in that regard. Our next speaker is Ms. Nafisa Farid. She's the CEO of Power for Less. She's well qualified with a master's in finance, and she's got an MBA. And she's been the CEO of Power for Less since its inception, which has been over the past 15 years, specializing in efficiency and alternative energy products to the South African market. It's one of the most represented energy companies in South Africa, and it's a supplier of tier 1 alternative energy solutions to companies such as Walmart. And it's also partnered with Standard Bank as a preferred service provider for their commercial and residential clients. As Dr. van Rooyen said, that does happen. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Ms. Nafisa Farid. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I'd just like to say, Peter, you did such a brilliant job. I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to share right now, but you covered most of the most critical, parameters that an individual needs to consider when looking for a solar solution. So just a brief introduction. The company is Power for Less. We are preferred suppliers to the Standard Bank network. We've actually been part of the Standard Bank forum of solar from inception, and we service both commercial as well as the residential customers. So from a financing perspective, I can definitely provide some insight regarding that. So, the thing is, I always say that the industry that we find ourselves in is a grudge industry. People are not really happy to be, looking at alternatives to power. In an ideal world, we would all love the grid to be fully functional and supplying us with power for us to be able to operate. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And as Peter mentioned, that even when, government basically says like, the grid is going to be up and running in 2 years, they are looking at power purchase agreements to feed into the grid to supplement the lack of power. The reality is that this is not a quick fix. And he is right, for the grid to do a turnaround, we're looking at least about minimum 4 to 5 years. It's really not as easy as just plug and play. Powering in power into the utility and it delivering magically to the country. The reality is that for a business, and I'm going to focus more on businesses because obviously, this is SADA. The need for having an alternative solution is a necessity nowadays in this country because lack of power directly impacts a business's profitability at the end of the day. More so given the fact that during peak load shedding, businesses are usually down during peak hours. And during those peak hours, the business relies on, their turnover to make month end. And when businesses are obviously, debilitated from access to power, it affects the business's profitability and viability in the long run. So, Peter basically touched on generators. So I want to obviously discuss that first, and then I'm going to discuss the options in the solar industry, what you can look at, and what are the limitations. I've avoided a PowerPoint presentation because I feel that sometimes it's easier to have a conversation. It's a very overwhelming market to be in, especially from a customer side. When we're discussing solutions, everything just becomes too much. So I'm opening the forum up to questions as I go along. If there's something that has, come across you that you'd like to ask, please go ahead and ask, and I'll do my best to answer them. So with regards to generators, there is no actual, if you look at it like holistically, return on investment. And the main outcome of a solar solution is ROI. That is what we always tell customers. When you're looking at moving to solar, you must look at it from a return on investment perspective. And I'm going to touch on why. So with the generator, you obviously have to fill the generator with diesel. Therefore, there's a constant cost that's involved with running that generator. Peter had touched on, various aspects. So when you are renting a premises, you have to get clearance from the landlord to be able to put a generator to feed power into your practice. We have found many cases where landlords has declined tenants from being able to add on generators onto their premises for various reasons. One, firstly, there is the concern that an outside service provider is going to interfere with their electrical wiring of the landlord's premises. Second, there's the noise pollution. The council can actually measure the decibels that the generator is emitting. And according to law and regulation, your generator should meet a certain noise decibel for it to be acceptable. The third is obviously pollution. You may have other tenants on the premises that may be averse to having pollution that is emanating from the generator. And there are various other options where, the industry calls them silent generators, when in actual fact, they're not silent. I doubt to date I've actually come across a silent generator. However, they emit lower decibels. So I would say they're more pleasing to the ear and they meet regulations. With generators, Peter touched on the maintenance. So when it comes to solar solutions, it's not very maintenance intensive. However, with generators, there's a lot of maintenance involved, and the maintenance is directly proportional to the hours of use. So, that cost needs to be taken into consideration. the running costs of it. And it's very important that if you have a generator, it's essential that it is maintained according to the hours of use, because if you do not maintain it, then obviously, like any car engine, it's going to, wear out, and the cost of replacing parts is going to be much greater. Another concern when it comes to generators is the cost of diesel. And if we see where the power crisis is moving in this country, yes, at this current moment in Gauteng, we're not, experiencing the high levels of power outages that we have, but I honestly believe it's just for a short stint, and we're going to move very quickly back onto stage 5 and 6. So eventually, the more strained the power grid becomes, the greater the demand on diesel is going to become, and that obviously is going to impact the cost of diesel. So in the long run, as a practice or a business, you need to take into consideration the rising cost of diesel and the hours that you are running the generator for and the cost implications thereof. So, there are many negatives when it comes to generators. The positives that generally drive individuals to going for a generator first and foremost is the cost involved. So naturally, you'd be able to get a generator that's got a greater output at a cheaper price than what you would get for a solar solution with similar output, because solar obviously is a much more expensive exercise. But in comparison between the two, the ROI weighs more heavily on solar than what you'd find on a generator. There are many banks that are financing generator solutions for businesses. So that is definitely something that can be looked at. But I can tell you honestly that having been in this industry and specializing in solutions for commercials, we find that a lot of customers are moving more towards supplementing their power generation from solar and limiting the amount of generator that they use in a month. So I find that they're mixing solutions where it is where you get your generator output, and then the shortfall is fed with the generator. And we often speak to clients, and especially in the restaurant industry, that complain that they're running at losses because of the cost of diesel. So diesel right now, it may seem like a cheaper alternative, but in the long run, it definitely costs the business a lot on a monthly basis. Solar solutions, there are many options available. There is the hybrid solution and off-grid, and I'm saying off-grid because there's terms and conditions that apply to off-grid. And there is grid-tied, which is not feasible in South Africa any longer. At many years ago, it was a feasible option. Many industries moved towards grid-tied. So grid-tied is where you are reliant on the electricity grid. The system can only function when it is tied to the grid. I'm going to just say utility. And if there's load shedding, then the system doesn't work at all. So individuals used to move towards grid-tied solutions to offset their electricity use and to benefit in the long run. Many years ago, there were many savings involved, but given the spate of load shedding now and what we're going to expect into the future, it's not a viable solution. And I find that many businesses are not even considering it. So they are looking at solutions where maybe there are more panels, but even if the storage is smaller, there is storage to make it a hybrid system. So a hybrid system basically can function by itself and can also feed from the grid to supplement the system when there is a shortfall on generation. And when I refer to generation, I'm referring to the sun, because that is where your power is being generated from. So on cloudy days, which we refer to as suboptimal conditions, naturally you're feeding a little bit more from the utility grid to supplement the shortfall from your solar. So those are hybrid solutions. And then the third option is backup solutions. So backup solutions is where you have a system, the size can vary. The power is stored from the electricity grid. The unit is tied into the essential loads of your main DV board. So essential loads, I would say, is your plugs, your lights, and it stores the power within the unit. So it has an inverter and a lithium-ion battery. It stores the power during while power is being fed, and during load shedding or power outages, it has an auto changeover. So it automatically changes over and it feeds the power back into the practice or the home or the business. It supplements you with that power to be able to run all your essential loads during the periods of load shedding, and your relief. And relief is when I say like the relief is when you are able to operate, you're able to function as normal to some extent. Is dependent on, firstly, the size of your inverter and the size of the storage, and more heavily on the size of the storage, because that is where your power is being stored. So backup systems work very well when it comes to businesses that don't own the property. So that is something that you need to consider as a business. If you're renting the property from a landlord and you don't have rights to roof, then backup solutions are definitely the way to go, because they do offer you the ability to operate during power outages, and you are able to implement them onto a landlord's building to feed power into your practice. We find a lot of businesses whereby the building is not owned are moving towards backup systems. And a key thing to look for in a backup system is one that's modular, so that you're not limited in any way. Because the last thing you want to do is purchase a backup system and find out that maybe in 2 years' time you decide to buy your own property and you want to move to solar, and you would like to use the backup system because obviously it's an inverter and a battery, but you're limited because it can only function in one way. And it's not modular in the way that you can now add panels onto it. So a very key thing to consider when you're looking at backups is look for one that allows you to convert it into a solar solution at a later stage. So meaning you can then add panels and then convert it into solar, so it no longer functions as a backup. When it comes to solutions that a business is looking at, it's definitely not an off-the-shelf product. Yes, there are sizes of solutions that we call off-the-shelf, but generally in our industry, we prefer to communicate and understand the needs of a customer. I suppose the same that would apply in the dental practice. Not everyone that walks in wants a crown for the same reason. The same is with solar. Usage is driven by behavior. So just to break it down as simple as possible, I may live in a huge home with a pool and have air conditioning and underfloor heating, and my neighbor has the same home with the same makeup. However, the drivers of, and my bill may be 6,000, and their bill may be 6,000, but the drivers of the amount of the bill is different. So I may be running my pool pump and my underfloor heating and my air conditioning the whole day. So my load is higher, and that would lead to the size of the inverter that I would require. Whereas my neighbor, the makeup of their 6,000 Rand could be different. Their load may be low, but their usage may be high. So the need for the system may be smaller because of the items that they are running. So when anyone asks, like, what size of solution am I going to require to be able to run something, it's not as simple as saying, it's going to be a 5 kVA or it's going to be a 5 kilowatt system. A little bit more in-depth understanding needs to happen to understand what are the items that you are running during power outages. Are they essential items? What is your budget? Okay, if this is your budget, will you be able to function with these items only during our power outages? What are the ratings of those items? And what is the backup time that you would require? So how long would you like to have relief during power outages? And that would determine, firstly, the storage of the battery that you would need. It would determine the inverter size that you would require. So it's definitely not something that is very off the shelf. And one of the guides I can give is to avoid just allowing someone to sell you a system. Go through the exercise of understanding the needs of your business. What do you want to run? What are the essential items? How long do you want to run them for? More so in line with backups. And what are the hours of use? So hypothetically, if you're running a practice that operates heavily in the evening, so let's say like about 4 o'clock onwards, that is basically what we call sundown hours. So when your generation is not at its peak, it's actually dipping and the sun is setting. And on solar, you now start migrating onto your battery storage. So if your practice is busy around those hours, you would obviously need more battery storage to be able to provide you backup power during those times. So just to give you an idea of generation, we call it peak generation hours. So our peak generation hours generally start from about 8 o'clock in the morning and end around maybe 3 o'clock when the sun starts setting slowly. That is a time in the day when you're getting the very best out of your system. Obviously, what you're generating depends on the amount of panels that you have on your roof. And like Peter mentioned, there are limitations when it comes to a property. Homes that have thatch roofs is a no-no in our industry. We don't install on thatch roofs. IBR roofs and certain roofs, we obviously need to accommodate different panel frames. So there is a cost implication when it comes to the type of roofs that we have. Majority of the homes and businesses in South Africa have what we call church roofs. So, the cost is pretty standard. However, when you have a different roof structure, then obviously different frames need to be accommodated for those installations. Generation depends on the wattage of the panel. So to give you an example, you would have a panel that is rated 410 watts. What that means is when it's a peak generation, that is the amount of power that is being generated by that single panel. So depending on the number of panels you have on your roof, determines the amount of generation that is being fed into the business. The limitations from roof depends on the size of your roof and the direction of your roof. So it's one of the reasons why, I say that the more we deepen into the crisis in South Africa from a power perspective, we have a lot of mom and pop shops and, bucky brigades that are popping up. And sadly, we've seen many customers that have lost their money on poor investments because there's a lot of technology and technical understanding that goes behind installing a system, as Peter has shown through the slides. Those are generally things that we as providers take into account. I don't think the customer really goes that deep into understanding the size of the cable, though, it's always important to do as much research as possible because an educated customer is a wise customer. And you can avoid situations whereby someone takes you for a ride and says, this is the cable that you need. You'd at least know that the kinds of cable that you'd require. So when it comes to the roof, the best generation is on the north side. So there are instances where we've worked with customers whereby they've had panels all over their roof, but the panels on the opposite side of the roof are not even generating any power. Simple things like panels being installed where there's shading. So shading has a negative effect on generation. And given the fact that installations are in strings, if you have shade on a panel that is in a string, the sad reality is that the entire string won't be generating power. Small things like not mixing the sizes of your panel. So, you cannot mix a 410 watt and couple it with a 545 watt panel. It doesn't operate that way. You actually lose the benefit of a 545 watt panel. Mixing and matching battery sizes. Those are things that you need to take into consideration. So it's very important to really do some research before just jumping into a solution. So I see there's a time check, so I'm going to try and go through this as quick as possible. When it comes to insurance, it's essential to insure your solar solution for many reasons. So when you're financing your solution, it's a requirement with the bank that you have to have insurance in place. And the reason being is tomorrow your system goes bust. You are 1 year into it and it is not a product or installation issue. You'll find yourself paying for the next 5 years for a system that's not working for you. So ensuring your system is essential. And the reason being is our electricity grid is very, very, very unstable. So while we do install and service providers should be installing surge protection on the systems. It's an absolute necessity, as well as earthing your system. There are instances whereby with an unprotected grid, we've got large amounts of current that is coming through, and it's greater than the surge protection of the system, and you have a situation where maybe your inverter would blow, or the system will malfunction, and it would not be a manufacturer's fault. It would actually be an outside fault that has impacted the system. Your insurance will then therefore cover that. Insurance is therefore acts of God. So while tier 1 panels are built to withstand hail, I know there was a question regarding that, there may be instances where, it's out of the norm that has been covered with the build of a tier 1 panel, and that's where your insurance would cover. And then naturally, yes, we live in South Africa, and given the power crisis, it's now, I would say, a commodity, solar solutions, and more so solar panels. So there have been instances whereby panels have been stolen off rooftops, and in those instances, obviously, your insurance will cover that. So it's very, very key that that is taken into consideration, and it also directly relates to the type of installer that you utilize. So if you migrate towards Baki brigades, and individuals that are not specialists in this industry, and they incorrectly wire your DB board. Remember, the wiring of your business is the brain and nerve center of the business. If it's incorrectly wired, you open yourself up to a fire hazard. And PV is one of the most dangerous forms of power if in the wrong hands. So if you're bringing in DC current into a premises and it's not regulated and controlled correctly, you could burn down the entire building. And in the case of that happening, the insurance company will not pay a single cent out to you because you did not have an accredited installer to install your solution. So, there's many, many reasons for it. From a financing perspective, there's been a migration of banks towards seeing the need, because at the end of the day, they do want to protect their own clients' investment. They also want to protect the residential, clients on their database, which is why for homes, they are allowing customers to increase their access bond facility to be able to pay for a solution. And there's many other finance options available on the home side. From a business perspective, the need and urgency to be able to finance alternative energy solutions is a necessity, because the viability of a business directly impacts the bank from being able to, get paid on any loans that the business may have taken out. So one of the banks that have really spearheaded, the PV and alternative options to the market is Standard Bank. And I'm not saying that because I am a preferred supplier to the bank. It's important to note that the bank complies with the CPA. Are other service providers on the database, and clients that go into the Standard Bank portal to request for solutions or quotes, which comes at no charge, have more than one quote presented to them. So a client is not forced to say, okay, you have to go with Powerful S, and that's the only company you have on offer. They have at least 3 companies at any given time that are available to quote, and they ensure that a client has 3 quotes from the bank before the client makes a decision. Obviously, if the client decides to jump the gun and say, this is the company I want to go for, they have that opportunity, but the bank does comply with that. So with businesses, there are many, many, many tax benefits that come with financing the solution. It's also more cost effective. And the comfort that you have with financial institutions is if they put their name behind a company, obviously it's their own reputation that they're trying to protect as well. So they've done extensive DD on the companies that are providing solutions to the financial institutions, which is why they're also willing to put the money behind it. And there's also room for recourse if the service provider has failed in any way, misrepresented what they are supplying, or the solution fails to work and it's actually the supplier's fault. So there is room for recourse and protection for the business in that regard. So, from a finance perspective, I find that we've had a huge volume of businesses that have moved to opt for the finance, even though they have had cash available. it's more beneficial to rent it on a long term than actually paying it out cash. And one of the benefits of having a system is that ensure that it's modular. So even if you're a business and you're a bit cash strapped and you can't go on the solution of your desire, ensure that you opt for a solution that's modular, that allows you to increase the panels at a later stage, that allows you to increase your inverter load, or that it allows you to increase your amount of battery storage that you have, because batteries are the most expensive part of the system, but they definitely provide a huge value to a user. So our modular systems are hugely beneficial because in a year's time or 2 years' time, you're able to then upgrade it and increase on the system. And if you utilize a tier 1 system, the question on tier 1, there is a listing called the Bloomberg listing. So it's basically like an energy index where companies are traded and ratings are provided. And when we say tier 1, those are brands that are listed with Bloomberg and are respected worldwide for their performance, for their warranty, and for how the company handles warranty claims. So, Peter had mentioned from panels, Jinko is a very, very well-known brand in our country. From tier 1 panels, you'll hear a lot of Canadian and JA Solar. And Jinko, so those are definitely panels that are valuable. They generally have a 25-year warranty and what we call a 30-year performance warranty. So performance warranty is when you maintain your system and utilize it correctly, you could extend its shelf life. Quality batteries and inverters, absolutely essential. The inverter is a very, very key part of the system. It's where power is being converted from DC to AC. And it's very important to invest in a quality inverter because you want lifespan out of it. The idea is ROI, if you think about it. And with the tariff increases year on year, the ROI is becoming much more attractive on solar solutions because the payoff is in a shorter period. Initially, a few years ago, your payoff would be about 5 to 6 years. With the current tariff increases and the projected tariff increases, you would find that in about a year, 2 years, you'd be paying off your system in under 2 years. Right now, ROI on certain systems are around 2.5 years. So quality systems matter at the end of the day, and quality systems coupled with a quality installation makes an overall investment that will deliver an ROI, because you can have the best system in the world, but if it's installed incorrectly, it's useless and you could void your warranty. So key pointers is obviously ensuring that you are having your system installed correctly. You are issued with a COC for the work, so there is liability that you can hold the installer by. Ensuring the individual has experience in the industry. Just being an electrician is not good enough. Having an electrical qualification does not mean that you are a solar specialist. So it's important to go with experience in this industry and ensuring that you have quality systems that are going to deliver on their lifespan, that are protected by warranties, so that you actually see the value of your ROI once it's being realized. So I think I've tried to cover as much as possible in the short time frame, and I'm open to any questions that you may have, if there are any that come on the forum. But I just want to touch on one question that was asked about backup systems via Leroy Merlin and Builders Warehouse and Macro. So I think Peter introduced, not Peter, sorry, I was introduced earlier that we supply Walmart. So naturally we supply Builders Warehouse and Macro nationwide, and we're currently, in negotiations to supply globally. It's very open in the market. It's been all over the news, the brand that was recalled nationwide because of overheating, as well as some certain systems were, blowing up. These backup systems, what is very important to understand is they also have a grading, and it's absolutely essential in this industry that the battery carries a quality grading. So when you're looking for a backup system, ensure that the battery within it is a lithium iron phosphate battery, what we call light PO4. That is definitely a battery to look out for in an equipment that you're buying off the shelf, because it guarantees you a long lifespan. Looking at the battery cycles, because that obviously gives you a guide as to how long you're going to get out of your battery life. And then also doing homework before you go and buy. We find that in this industry, we have a lot of clients that go in and they buy a 1 kilowatt, solution, and they would try and plug in 3 kilowatts into it. It doesn't work like that. It's rated 1 kilowatt. It also has to save some power, so it doesn't discharge the full 1 kilowatt. That is what any system should be doing. And, you need to utilize it correctly for you to be able to benefit from the lifespan and benefit from the relief that it provides you. There are many limitations that come to these systems. You can't plug it into a wall socket and drop the breakers on your main DV and expect it to power up a practice. It does not work like that. These are items that store power, and you plug in a device onto the unit to be able to get power from it. So even when you're buying any item off the shelf, please do homework. Make sure that you have an understanding of what you require and match it against the size that you are looking at to see whether it's going to deliver the value that you wish to attain. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Nafisa. There's there were a couple of questions. I think you addressed most of them as we had raised them earlier. There is just one final question. Are Pylon Tech batteries any good?
So I would say that it's an okay brand. Just what I would suggest is obviously check the warranty on the battery and what brand it is, because there's different grades of Pylon Tech. Also ensure that the best option to go with your battery would be to get a battery that's the latest in lithium ion. So ensure that you're getting the latest generation, so that you're not limited later on when you need to upgrade your system or upgrade your storage and you find out that you bought an old generation brand and it's discontinued. So that it will obviously give you issues with being able to add on storage later on.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Is there any contact details that people can get you at?
I didn't really prepare for putting up.
I've got your website. I can put that up on the Q&A. If then anyone who's interested can contact you.
Yes. So if you're looking, you can go on our website, and our email addresses is residential@power4less, so it's pwr4less.com, and commercial@pwr4less.com. You can also find us by Standard Bank. So Standard Bank has a division called Luxi Power Pulse, as well as Power Pulse. You can contact them, and obviously they'll put you in touch with Power4less.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you to both our speakers for their time and knowledge. And I'm sure we all leave a bit more enriched and less confused about the new normal that we're facing. Apart from all the other challenges we face, I think this is one of the most debilitating ones. We do need power to practice, and from a personal experience, I know it's been tough. So hopefully we can take this knowledge and empower ourselves. So thank you to Nafisa. We appreciate your time as well. Just as before we close off, we'd like to just remind you to stay on so that you can fill out, or when the session ends, that you can just fill in the little questionnaire regarding the webinar at the end, so we can get some valuable feedback from you. Thank you all for your time. We appreciate it, and have a great evening further. So the session is closed.